Hello and welcome to Immediate Immersion Live, where we're all about comprehension-based instruction in the modern language classroom. Today we're going to be talking about creating your own materials. What kinds of things you can do to make it easier, to make your life easier, and create some original materials that actually apply to your students and give that personalization that goes along. So if that's something that you're interested in, go ahead and hit that like button. Let us know. Let us know in the comments any ideas that you may have as well. Either share live in our comments, or if you're watching on the replay, post the comments below. I'd love to read what you have to say. My name is Scott, and we'll be right back. And welcome back. Here, let me fix my camera here. It's chopping my head off today. Let's see here. Let's go right here. Bear with me just a second. There we go. Much better. And let me get this out of the way. And it doesn't want to go out of the way today. There it goes. Okay. So, let's see. What are we talking about today? We're talking about creating your own comprehensible input materials. And I know that seems daunting. Like, who has time for all of that? But the problem is there aren't a heck of a lot of pre-made materials out there for comprehension-based instruction. And what there is out there is not personalized to your students. And so that's what we're talking about today. How do we get that to take and create our stuff so that we have something that's actually personalized to our students? And once you create the bare bones, then you can replicate that year after year after year. You can use those bare bones, change out student names, and you have your own curriculum easily created. So the first step in this is coming up with your proficiency levels. You need to figure out what levels you're teaching and at what proficiency levels these students are at. Generally speaking, if you're in the United States, your level ones are going to be at the novice low towards the novice mid by the end of the year. Your level twos are going to be somewhere in that novice mid to novice high. Your level threes are going to be in that novice high to intermediate low. And then your level fours, your APs, your higher IBs are going to be in that intermediate mid. Intermediate takes a long time to get out of. It's kind of like the muddy waters. You see a lot of growth with students between novice to novice mid to novice high. But once you get into the intermediate, the growth is slower. They're in that intermediate stage a lot longer. If you're talking about your European framework, which I like so much better than the American one, you're looking at your level ones are going to be in your A1 to A2. Your level twos are going to be in your A2 to B1. Your level threes are going to be in your B2 to C1. And then your level fours and above are going to be in that C1. You might be able to get some into the C2, but that may be difficult doing. But you want to figure out what you're going to be doing with your proficiency levels. You need to first identify those proficiency levels so you can target their abilities. You don't want to make it too hard, but at the same time, you don't want to make it too easy. It needs to be comprehended at their level, but there's got to be room to grow. If you don't have that little bit of the little bit of newness to it, there's no place for them to grow, and they're going to be stagnant in their growth. So it's really important to nail these proficiency levels, but give them a place to grow so that you've got students who are making the progression from one level to the next. So it's really, really important. One of the things I like to do to kind of simplify things is when I'm trying to see what is expected of novice low, novice mid, you can look at the documents in your European framework or your ACTFL documents and kind of see there, or if you're working with IB, you can see those documents. But I don't find those to be as helpful and as clear as Googling what a kindergarten paper or a kindergarten conversation would be in your common language, not the target language, in the common language. So for me, that would be English. And then I will go and Google that and see what it looks like to kind of refresh my memory. This is where the kids are going to be ending up in level 1, somewhere in that kindergarten stage. And then I like to Google a first grade paper, or whatever you call it in your school. That would be the second year of public schooling. And see what that looks like. What do they talk about? What do those conversations look like? What do any papers that they write, any stories that they write, what does that look like? Grade 2 for level 3, and then grade 3 for level 4, just to kind of get an idea. Because remember, our kids, although the College Board who creates the AP exam and the people who create the IB exam, they expect your students to be fluent after 4 years of language. Let's be honest, that's not going to happen. And I hate that, especially in the AP exam. The AP Spanish exam is the same exam I give here in the United States. Oh, I don't give, but whoever gives it in the United States, it's the same exam given to native speakers in Mexico, in Spain, in Guatemala, etc. And although they do spread out the scores, but they're really competing with native speakers. And those kids had 18 years of language practice. And so I don't really think it's fair to have them all in the same lump, but it is what it is. So once you've figured out your proficiency levels, the next thing you want to talk about is the content. You need to choose what content. So what I do is I have my basic meat and potatoes of my lesson. So my meat and potatoes are my targeted vocabulary, which I use the Sweet 16 from Mike Pito. Then I have my conversations. Then I have story time, and that could be in one of 3 forms. It could be the class coming up with a story together. It could be we're using a picture to generate a story, so picture talk. Or it could be we're using a video to generate a story, i.e. movie talk. So one of those 3 things for that oral practice. Then we have reading, and so that could either be in the form of an extended reading or a novel, though when we do teach a novel, I stop everything else, so I don't do stories. All I do is the novel till it's finished. I'll do conversations one day of the week, and then I'll do novels the rest of the week to get the novel done. And then the last thing beyond reading is some kind of review activity. And so I usually will alternate between doing some type of game like Kahoot or Gimkit, something like that, to doing a write and discuss, so that I'm asking questions to review the content of the week, and then we write it down as a class together. It usually takes me 2 weeks to come up with all of that. To cover all of that. So in the first week, we're doing vocabulary practice, we're doing conversations, we're working on a story, and then we do a write and discuss. Then the next week, I'm going vocabulary, I'm doing conversations, but instead of the story, we're doing a reading. And instead of a write and discuss, I'm doing a fun activity like a Kahoota, Gimkit, something like that. That's my basic structure. But on top of that, I also need some filler activities. So we do a song, and I have quick writes, I have reflections, and I have some sort of practice activity and silent reading. So that rounds out the big picture of my lesson plan. So let's talk about then choosing that content. So I teach all levels at my school this year. So I'm teaching level 1, level 1B, level 2, and level 3. That's all the classes that we have other than heritage speakers. So I teach all of those classes this year. So I need to make sure that I'm choosing content that's appropriate for each level. And so the first thing I do is I establish what vocabulary that I want to cover. And as I said, we focus on, in my school, as our curriculum base, the Sweet 16 verbs. If you Google that, you're going to find a really good infographic by Martina Becks, and that's what I use as my guideline. Those are my 16 verbs I work with. Why these verbs? They are high frequency, but they're not necessarily the highest of frequencies, but they're high frequency and they give a lot of bang for their buck. They're very versatile, so they can be used in multiple contexts to express multiple ideas. They're not just a one-shot pony. So there are some very high frequent verbs that I'm not focusing on because they're one-shot ponies. They can only be used in one particular context, and they're not that, they're not that versatile. So I only have so much time in my classroom, and I want to maximize impact. So I focus on the 16 verbs. Now, obviously, I can't teach language with only 16 verbs. Not going to happen. But by focusing on these 16 verbs, my kids actually acquire this. Mostly because I tell them we just have to know these 16 verbs. And then the stress goes down, because when they see a textbook and they see 75 to 100 words every chapter, they're like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to remember all these words. But when I tell them we're focusing on these 16 verbs, that stress comes down, that affective filter comes down, and they're open to understanding more language. And because I can't speak in the target language only using 16 words, other words come into play. And if they're high frequency, they come into play often, and they just get in by osmosis. It really does work. An example, I didn't realize how much I used the word tampoco, which means either or neither in Spanish. But I had kids starting to use it not only in speaking, but also in their writing. And I'm like, where did you pick up that word? I haven't taught that word, never wrote that word on the board. They're like, you use it all of the time. So I don't have to teach the adjectives or the numbers or those as explicit things, because I'm using them all the time in real context with these 16 verbs, and kids get them for free. They pick them up for free because I'm concentrating on something much smaller. So I just have to break it up. Now, I think of it when I'm doing my overall picture for all my levels. In level 1, our main overall arching grammar point that we focus on at our school is past versus present. So in the languages that have two pasts, we teach the one that is more common for that verb. So I'm talking about the Latin-based languages that have the preterite or the past the present perfect, whichever, and then the imperfect. So whichever is more common for that verb. For example, again, using my Sweet 16, if it's the verb is, the most common form in Spanish is the imperfect of that verb. So I'm going to teach era. For goes, the most common past tense would be the preterite. So I'm going to teach fue. In level 2, my goal, my overarching grammar goal, is to teach the difference between the two past tenses. So whichever one we haven't covered in level 1, we're going to add to it in level 2. It doesn't mean that in level 1, I don't use iba, which is was going. It's the imperfect of the verb to go. I use it when I need to. It's just I'm not focusing on that. I'm not assessing on that. But in level 2, I will. And then level 3, we focus on the future, the conditional, and a little bit of subjunctive. Now, they're going to hear past perfect in there. They're going to hear some other tenses in there, and that is fine. But those are the 3 that I'm really focusing on in my level 3. So I think about that as I go along. And I adapt that to my Sweet 16. So once we learn the Sweet 16 in level 1, I can then add on new grammar to familiar words. The textbooks often like to give you brand new verbs and then new grammar on those verbs at the same time. And I don't find that as successful because that's 2 things the kids are trying to learn at the same time. A new verb and a new tense with that verb. Rather, either teach a new verb and use tenses they already know, or teach a new tense but use verbs they already know. So they're not having to learn 2 things at once. So I'm focusing on that. So in level 1, we learn them in present tense. And then we practice them in the common past tense for that verb. Then in level 2, we're practicing them again in present tense. We're practicing them again in their common past tense. But then I'm adding that third tense in there for them. And we're practicing that. And then in level 1, we review everything from, level 3, we review everything from level 1 and level 2. And then the first verb tense I start to teach is the conditional. And then we start doing what would you do kind of statements, what would you do kind of questions. But again, with those verbs. And once they're familiar with these Sweet 16 verbs and how to make these tenses with those, they can extrapolate that into other verbs that are also common and high frequency, but not ones we are actively targeting. So that's how I'm picking my vocabulary. My next piece are my conversation questions. What kinds of questions can I ask my students knowing that I'm going to be talking to my kids for the first month to 6 weeks on one question to get to know my students at the beginning of the year, but then after that for once a week over the rest of the year. Now, conversations for me are not a wham bam thank you ma'am kind of thing. I am working with getting to know my students. So a day I might get through 2, maybe 3 kids a day, with the goal of getting through every kid a couple of times throughout the year. So not every kid is going to be asked the same question. At the beginning of the year, for all my levels, I spent 4 to 6 weeks to get to know my students based on one conversation question. For my level 1s, what's your favorite activity or sport? For my level 2s, what are you afraid of? For my level 3s, we talk about their summer vacation. We can go much more open-ended in my level 3s because they have more language under their belt. And so we can talk about a lot more stuff. I don't have to laser focus in on one thing. So those are my introductory ones, and we're just finishing those up this week. And I think we're just in the 6th week of school this week. So I'm just finishing that up. But now I've got to start thinking about what types of questions do I want to ask at each level that I'm going to be asking every week for the rest of the year. Now, I don't switch up my questions every week, probably every other week. But I want to have a list of questions that I can use to ask my students, and not just simple questions, ones we can actually have a conversation about. Things like, what's your favorite movie? Because then I can ask, did you watch that movie in the theater, or did you watch it at home? Did you watch it with your family? Did you watch it with your friends? What did you eat while you watched this movie? What kind of movie is it? Who's your favorite actor in that movie? Do you have a favorite scene or a favorite line? See what the avenues that we can go to. And that takes up 10-15 minutes of class time to progress through the language. So I'm going to go through all of my questions, knowing what I have to cover in my school year. And I can target these questions towards that. But they're not thematically based. They're based on interest level and what I can get out of my students for them. So in level 1 is, again, I am working on the difference between past and present. So I'm going to be asking different questions based on, some weeks we're going to go on the present tense, some weeks on the past, like what did you do over the weekend? Those kinds of things. Or, focusing on those contents. So that's my next content to go through. And we'll talk a little bit more about this with the tech tools at the end, but if you are at a loss for types of questions, you can go to ChatGPT for free. I pay for it because it's very worth my $20 a month. And I could ask it for some ideas of questions. And let me give you an example. For years, I have been doing, and while I'm talking to you, I'm looking up a document so that I can talk to you about it. For years, I have been asking that fears question. But I run out of ideas for questions other than, what are you afraid of? Why are you afraid of it? And what do you do when you're afraid of it? So I went through and I asked ChatGPT to give me some questions about fears that I could ask. And so these are the ones that it gave me. Why are you afraid of something? Are you afraid of the dark? What's your biggest fear? Are you afraid of spiders? These are so genetic ones. Are you afraid of electrical storms? Do you have a fear of dogs or cats? Are you afraid of horror movies? What animal scares you the most? So we've already asked them what they're afraid of, but maybe they didn't put an animal down. Maybe they put down heights or stuff like that, or closed spaces. But I can ask kids questions, what animal scares you the most? Or I can ask them, have you had a nightmare recently? What was it about? Do you have a fear of speaking in public? What is one thing that you would like to try, but you are scared of? Are you afraid of flying? Are you afraid of doctors or hospitals? Are you afraid of shots? Are you afraid of being home alone? Is there something that scares you at school? Are you afraid of the water or swimming in the ocean? Are you afraid of ghosts or haunted houses? Are you afraid to go on, what do we call it? Roller coasters. I couldn't think of what it was called. Let's see, what else did it give me? Are you afraid of traveling alone? Are you afraid of the future? Are you afraid of closed spaces? Are you afraid of wild animals? Are you afraid of the deep water or marine animals? Are you afraid of open spaces? Are you afraid of blood? You get the idea. I ran out of ideas, so I asked ChatGPT to give me some ideas, and it gave me a lot of them. Not all of them could I use, but it gave me ideas to help me go through. So there's my conversation piece. Now I need to come up with a story. Now, as I said, we'll talk about all three types. Let's talk about first the story. I don't come up with a pre-planned story. I use my 4-point skeleton: character, problem, failure, success. So I've got to have a character that we're going to create. We're going to give this character a problem to solve. They're going to try to solve it but fail. And then they're going to try to solve it and succeed. So that's kind of my story framework that I use. And I don't know, other than that, I don't know what we're going to come up with. I have my sweet 16 verbs written on an index card where I see it as I'm walking around the classroom teaching. So that it reminds me, I got to get that word in there, I got to get that verb in there, I got to get that verb in there. Because I need to work them in context. So I will start on that first day and I will say, we need to create a character, and I'm asking leading questions to develop a character. And on the second day, we give that character a problem and they work through the plot of the story. But I don't know what that's going to be coming in. I just know I'm working with those 4 things: character, problem, failure, success. That's it. If I'm doing a movie, let's do picture talk first. I will then go search on the internet under Google Images for, these are the 3 things I usually look for: funny animals, funny babies, or awkward family pictures. And then I pick pictures that not only are going to generate high interest for my students, but that I can talk about. Now, I'm not picking these based on any theme. We're teaching whole language. No parent has ever in the history of humankind ever taught their kid the native language in themes. And so I don't do it in my classroom. It is not natural. It is just not natural. No kid memorized all the zoo animals at once. No kid memorized all the fruits and vegetables at once. Absolutely not. So I don't do that in my classroom. So I'm not picking it to say I want to target words. Because my Sweet 16, they're high frequency. I can work them into anything. I don't have to try. It's not hard. So I will find any picture that I want to talk about. We start with describing the picture, and then we give that picture some kind of problem to work through, and now we're back to a story. We are in a story with character, problem, failure, success. For a movie talk, same thing. I go to YouTube, and I prefer to use animated shorts. So I will Google in... I'll put in the YouTube search that I want in animated shorts, and I will look for ones that I know will be highly engaging with my students. Why do I like animated shorts? Number 1, they're short. Number 2, they usually don't have any dialogue. And dialogue can be troublesome if it's not in the language that you're teaching. And even if it is, it might be higher level than what your kids can understand. So I prefer not to have any dialogue in there. I could insert my own. And so I like that. And they also got some kind of humorous punchline usually at the end. A surprise ending to somewhat. So that's why I like these the best. And I use these. And then I make screenshots of all the key scenes. And then we talk about it before I show them the video at the end. This makes it a little bit easier because the story's already built in there. Because I don't have to think about it. It's already done. Where a picture talk and just a regular story, we've got to work together to come up with something. But it is collaborative. With a movie talk, we can still be slightly collaborative, but it's more restricted by what is on that screenshot, what's in that video. But it still works. And I alternate these things. When I get tired of stories, I'll change it up with a picture talk, or I'll change it up with a movie talk. So I usually do like I might do like 3 stories in a row, and then I'll do a picture talk. Then I'll do 3 stories in a row, and then I'll do a movie talk. Then I'll do 3 stories in a row, and I'll go back to a picture talk, just to change things up for a little bit. But I really want to emphasize the collaborative nature of the story, so I do that one the most. And it's the more fun for all of us along the way. Next, I've got to come up with my reading. Now, I don't like to just write down the story that we did earlier. Why? Number one, my students think it's the same thing. So they go, we just did this story. They don't understand that listening to a story and reading the story are not the same things. So that's number one. Number two, by doing the same story, one orally and then the same story written, students and often teachers think the goal is to learn the story. That's not the goal. The goal is to learn the language within the story, the vocab and the grammar. So by providing opportunities to learn the vocab and the grammar in different contexts, one context for the oral story, one context for the written story, they're getting it in different contexts, and then they more likely will get to the proficiency of those vocabulary and structure. Whereas if it's the same story, it's the same context, they might not be able to use that vocabulary and grammar outside of that context because they're fixated on remembering the story. And the story is just the vehicle to provide language. Just like if we're all going to meet in a conference in Chicago, some of you are close to Chicago, so you'll drive. Some may fly because you're far away. Some are far away, but they don't like to fly, so they take a train. It doesn't matter how we got there. The point is getting there. So it doesn't matter the story. What matters is the language they're getting from the story. So that's what's important. That's what we want to focus on. So by giving them a variety. Now, when I write my stories, I do pre-write them. I make a goal of 300 to 500 words. Again, I have my list of Sweet 16 that I'm trying to get in and try to use them in each story. And then I'm inserting my students' names in the story. And if I know some tidbits about my student, I'm going to put them in there. So if I know that Johnny plays basketball, I'm going to find a way to put Johnny in the story and him playing basketball or talking about basketball. And then if Sarah is a dancer, I'm going to find a way to put that in there. So any tidbits that I can about students to make it more personalized, I will put in the writing assessments. In the reading here. Write and discuss. Again, all I'm doing is we're reviewing something from earlier, usually a story, the movie talk, or the picture talk. I'm asking leading questions to review it. I'm writing it on the board, and my kids are copying it down. Then I make Kahoots and Gimkits and Blookits and any other digital games that you can do. You can make different ones. As I'm going up the levels, though, I try to go a little bit deeper than just who, what, where, when, and how. So I try to go a little bit deeper with those. Okay, so that's how I'm choosing the content that I'm working with. Next, let's talk about scaffolding. Not only do you have to scaffold within the academic year, you also need to scaffold between the levels. I kind of told you how we did that grammar-wise with past versus present, imperfect versus preterite, and then future, conditional, and some subjunctive. That's kind of how I do it that way. But also think about throughout your year. Anything that's difficult or thought of as difficult, I want to expose early and assess late. So, for example, I don't explicitly teach direct and indirect pronouns. I attach them to the verbs that go with them. And we start early. I'm not going to start even assessing them until level 2. But my level 1s know le da, he or she gives to him or her. Or le dice, he or she says to him or her. Because I use them all the time. So I'm exposing them early. I'm thinking about that. So difficult stuff I expose. My level 1s hear subjunctive. My level 2s hear subjunctive. But I'm not even going to begin assessing it until the end of level 3. But they're exposed to that. So look at what you have to teach and find a progression that works. Not only within the level, but also between the levels. Practical tips. For practical tips, one of my things is I like to keep my classes in sync. So if I'm doing a conversation day in level 1, I'm doing a conversation day all the way through. So my level 1s, my 1Bs, my level 2s, and my level 3s. All of them are getting conversation day. What we're talking about, not the same thing. If I'm doing a story, again, all the classes have a story. If we're doing culture, all the classes have a culture topic, but not necessarily the same one. So that makes things a lot easier, especially if you teach a lot of levels like I'm teaching this year, or you're teaching a lesser taught language like French or German or Mandarin, where you're the only teacher and you have to teach all the levels. It makes it a lot easier if you are teaching in parallel. So everybody's doing the same activity, just the content of that activity is different. You can also, with picture talk or movie talk, use the same pictures and the same videos for all your levels. You're just going to ratchet up the grammar and the type of questions you're going to be asking along the way. If you do that, though, then you're going to have a cycle of these. So in your first cycle, you're doing these pictures and these videos. In your second cycle, you're doing these pictures and these videos. So kids aren't getting the same video over and over and over again. I don't do that, though. I have my level 1 pictures and videos. I have my level 2 pictures and videos. And I have my level 3 pictures and videos that I'm working with. So although I'm doing a picture talk in all the classes, I have different pictures for each level, so they're not seeing the same pictures all of the time. And it's not repetitive. My also is organize your stuff into a Google Drive or some other kind of drive, a OneDrive, so that you have access to it no matter what on any computer. And then you want to put it in there by your levels that you teach, so you have it every year, and this becomes your curriculum. And then you can change it up next year by making a few changes to your stories so that they're now applicable to your new students. That makes things a lot easier. And again, if anybody has any questions or comments, feel free to put them in the chat. Last thing I want to talk about is tech tools. So tech can be your friend. I build my lessons in Google Slides so that what I do first, let me go back up. I have one Google Slide deck for my entire week. And I'll have a section for Monday, a section for Tuesday, a section for Wednesday, a section for Thursday. Sean says, this is fantastic. I'll be using it tomorrow. So glad, Sean, to help you out. So I will do it that way. In fact, let me go ahead and let me open up a browser window here. Give me 1 second so that I can share it with you Move this down here. I'll show you with what my current week looks like so you can kind of see. And let me get it ready here. And I'll just pull up Spanish 2. Okay, let's go to screen share. Okay, so here's what I'm talking about, how I use the tech. So this is my slide deck for week 8 of our school year. So this is what we're doing. My focus is on the culture of bullfighting. And so I have all my slides for the whole week are here. This is my Monday slides. All the stuff that I'm going to be covering are here. There's our song. There's the vocabulary. That's the Sweet 16 that we're focusing on. This is a homework assignment they have. These are my class rules, our review. We're not speaking English. Here's reviewing weather, months, days of the week. Here we pick some weather because I'm in California. So I have to pick other places for the weather to get some variety in there. Here are my Sweet 16 verbs up there when I'm working with them. I can put them up there right away. Here is our practice of vocabulary of our Sweet 16. Our goal for the day is I can understand and discuss the culture. And then I have all my culture slides that we are going over. And then if I keep scrolling down, now we're on Tuesday, and it goes through the same thing. There's my warm-up, silent reading. So I have my lesson plans all done this way. This is how I do them. And then this way I don't have to worry about an agenda or anything like that. All I've got to do is, what am I doing next? I click to the next slide, and it tells me. Any announcements I have to make, they're all in here as well. I just do them all in there. So that's what I do for that. But also, I use a lot of other tech tools. So I make videos for my students, and so I can use a recorder to record the video. You can use Loom, I think, is free for teachers. That's one that I use, and I haven't had to pay for it because I gave, during COVID time, I gave them my teacher information, and I've been able to use it free ever since. So I don't know if it's still free for teachers or just because I signed up during the COVID times that I can still use it. But you've got Loom, Screencastify. There's so many different recorders out there. You can use your phone. You can do all different kinds of things. I know that Amy, and I can't think of her last name. It starts with an M, but I can't think of her last name. She does a lot of videos using Snapchat. She makes videos with the Snapchat filters in them and makes them really funny, and she'll do stories with that. But you can use these things to make some stories so kids can work independently sometimes when you need a little bit of a break. For listening type activities, I like to use an app called Soundtrap. It's free. They will nag you to sign up for a plan every time you log in. I just X out of it. I've been using it for years, and I've never had to pay a single cent for it. What I like about it, I can record listening assessments or listening activities, so I don't have to keep using my voice for that. And I can just play them, and I organize them in folders right on the site. It lets me store them right there. So I have a folder for level 1, a folder for level 2, a folder for level 3 with all the different ones that we do. And then the kids can listen to them for an assessment or if it's a listening activity. One of the things I do in my level 3 is I do a murder mystery in my level 3 class. And we have 10 interrogations. 5 of them are reading interrogations where they're reading the transcript of the interrogation. But then there are 5 of them that are oral, so they're listening to the interrogations. So we pre-recorded these, so I don't have to do it every year. And it becomes much more fun that way. And it's easier on my voice, and kids can pay attention, listen, answer questions about those. So soundtrap.com is a great thing, and you can also do it on your phone. It's got both Android and iOS on there, and you can record on your phone if you want. I record it on my computer, but what I love about it, it saves them. I used to use GarageBand on my computer, but then I never could remember what I named the file or where I saved it. Here I don't have to worry about it because it is built in. When I go to the site, all of my files are there. You can download them if you want, but why? It stores them there for free. I know where they are. I never have to search and hunt for them. And another benefit to that is when kids are absent on a listening test, they don't have to come in after school or during lunch to make it up. I can have them right away while I've got them captive in class. Go to my desk, put the headphones on, play the listening, and answer the questions right away. I love it. It saves me so much time. We've already talked a little bit about ChatGPT, but ChatGPT can be really helpful. It can give me ideas like, ChatGPT, I am really stuck. Can you give me 4 or 5 story plot ideas? And then it'll give you some ideas, and then you can work from there. Or comprehension questions. Oh my gosh, I get so tired of always thinking up comprehension questions. I tend to ask the same questions all the time. So I will feed it my reading that I wrote, and then I'll ask it to write 10 or 20 comprehension questions for that. Or if it's an assessment, I've already written my prompt, either my listening prompt or my reading prompt. I will feed it to ChatGPT and ask it to come up with the test questions so that they're not going to be biased by what I always ask. So it's a great, great, great tool to use. You can ask it about anything, but don't take it for granted. Don't just copy and paste what it gives you. Read through it. Make sure it's correct. Make sure it's what you want to target on there. But I ask it all the time to help me come up with ideas for things. Like, I write these readings. I write one for every other week of school. So think about that. That's at least 15 to 20 of these stories that I've got to come up with. Sometimes I run out of ideas, but I can go to ChatGPT saying, okay, ChatGPT, here are my sweet 16 verbs, and I list them. Can you give me 20 different plot ideas using these verbs? Now I've got 20 ideas. I can pick and choose what I want. I can ask him to give me some new ones because I didn't like those. But I can start writing stories based off those. And it gives me a lot of information. I can also start with my big chunk of writing and ask it to simplify it for me so I can make some embedded readings. I wrote the original, but now I'm asking it to simplify it to give me some different versions for embedded readings. There are so many things that ChatGPT can do. So think about how it can make your life easier. Again, don't plagiarize. It's not really plagiarizing because it's a tool. But just don't copy exactly what it gives you. Sometimes it's wrong. Sometimes it makes mistakes. But it's not really as personalized as you could make it. I have done it, had me do some different things with stories. Like, I have a kid who is obsessed with a Rubik's Cube and obsessed with a cat, his cat. So I wrote the story about the Rubik's Cube, about him going around summer vacation practicing his Rubik's Cube, but I couldn't think of an ending and I wanted to include the cat. So I gave it my first few paragraphs of my story and I said, give me a surprise ending that combines the Rubik's Cube with the cat. And then it came out that he lost his Rubik's Cube and the cat stole it. He went looking everywhere, couldn't find it. And then one day he walked in to the living room. He sees his cat playing with his Rubik's Cube. And not only that, solving the Rubik's Cube faster than he ever could. So it was kind of a funny little ending. And I wouldn't have thought of that on my own. I gave it to ChatGPT, the story that I had written, and asked it to come up with a fun, interesting ending that combined the Rubik's Cube with the cat. And it gave me a couple of them, ideas. And then I said, I don't like that one. Give me a new one. I don't like that one. Give me a new one. Hola, Jerry. One of my students just popped on. So those are my ideas for doing all kinds of creating your own content that's personalized with your students. Once you do it once, as I said, you can reuse the information year after year after year. And just change up the students' names or some details to personalize it. Are there any questions before we wrap up? While you're talking about that, we have started our assessment academy. It is recorded, so we did a live class on Sunday yesterday, and we started. It's a 10 webinar series. If you're interested, you can go to mm.us/academy. You can participate live or watch the replays. You'll have access to all the replays through the end of 2024. So if it's something you're interested in, you can go to mm.us/academy and register for that. We talk about everything and anything about assessment and grading. So yesterday we talked about the basics of proficiency-based grading, and next Sunday we're going to be starting to talk about assessments. And it goes for 10 weeks straight, with the exception of Thanksgiving break. Also, I want to let you know that, and I need to put this here. Let's first put, let's go. We have our Comprehended conference coming up in February. It starts. I know it seems like a long way away, but our early bird registration prices end on September 31st. So if you want to get in on the lowest price possible, you want to register at comprehended.co/register no later than the 31st, so that you can get the lowest deal possible. The prices are going to go up on October 1st. So just want to let you know about that as well. And it doesn't look like anybody has any questions. If you found this helpful, please like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already subscribed. It really helps us out a lot if you share this with other teachers who might be interested in the same kind of content to get it out there. And next week, we will be meeting again, same time, same channel. And our topic next week, let me get that up here real quick before I forget here. Where are we talking about next week? We are talking about scaffolding, how to scaffold things in the classroom for your CI classroom. So that's what we'll be talking about next week, 5 o'clock Pacific time, 8 o'clock Eastern time. I hope to see you there. And until next time, have a great week, and I'll see you next week. Goodbye, everyone.